Welcome back to part two of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast with X and KB. We got to jump into some breaking news. Not really breaking news. This happened the other day. Tiger Woods was yet again in the headlines, but for all of the wrong reasons. He was involved in a potential, possibly DUI crash, where his vehicle was rolled over on the scene. This is his fourth major crash. And I think that this is just such a bad thing for Tiger Woods because I thought that he was, making, progress in his life. I think that with him spending so much time with his son, Charlie, that we finally saw him, turning a corner in his life. I think that, and X, I'll get your opinion on this soon. I think that he does. That him making the decision to step away from golf to focus on his mental health. I think this is very important because, like I said, we've seen things like this cause people to honestly, you know, change their life altogether. I think that him being in the headlines more so now, for other things other than golf, which is what we've always known him to be, one of the greatest golfers that we've ever seen in our lives. And he honestly inspires so many people to, to put eyes on the sport of golf. I think that this is one of those things where, it's a unfortunate news more so than anything. I think that, we're still getting more and more details each day. People are going to have their think pieces on it. But I think that it's very important that, Tiger Woods, take some time away to actually focus on him, focus on family life, focus on his mental health. Things are going to, he's going to have to take the lumps and bumps that come with the fact that he's back in the headlines again, once again for another crash. And if this is, I mean, like I've seen people make fun of his mug shot. Ever since the crash happened the other day, I think that it's just more so people thought that he was reverting back to his old ways. I honestly hope that this is not like one of those things where he relapses and back into that dark time that, where he fell from grace from the national media, where he was like sports darling on the cover of all the magazines, constantly being, in the Masters tournament. I think that we need to, honestly, he needs prayer. He does. If anybody could, benefit from therapy, prayer, just, overall people putting their arms around him, I think it could be him because he may be fighting some demons that we have no idea about. And so I think that golf right now is not that important. I really don't. I think that he needs to focus on other things right now. And I think that him being who he is, it is going to be hard because he's going to constantly be reminded of you know yet another car crash, yet another possible DUI. All of these things are going to follow him for the remainder of his life, not only his life, his career. So he could stand to use some time away from everything right now, and luckily it wasn't worse than what it was because it could have had potential for being even fatal. So I just hope that he gets the help that he needs. I really do because, like I said, this is a real fall from grace, type of moment where I think that his image over the last 10 years has taken such a hit from just the initial crash, the initial things with his wife. I think all of his ex-wife. I think that all of these things are you know hurting his image, and I really hate to see it because, like I said, he was one of the greatest athletes of our generation that we've ever seen. And just to see this is real disappointing.
Yeah, man, I reported on this in real time as it was happening last Friday. And when the details first came out that he had been in a rollover crash and that there were no other details or any word about his condition, I immediately just started praying, just please don't let this be something catastrophic. Don't let this be a fatal. Don't let it be anything like that. Because if you'll remember the crash that he was in 2021 in Los Angeles, it could have taken his life. He had to have multiple major leg surgeries, but we honestly were sitting on pins and needles that day, just hoping that we weren't going to end up getting the worst of news, and thankfully we didn't. And thankfully we didn't in this situation as well. But as you said, there is something deeper that's going on there. I don't know if they're demons or not, but he's got a problem. And the problem needs to be addressed. And it's up to him to properly address it. I feel like he's taking the right steps forward to do that by taking time away from the game. But there's really something that needs to be addressed there, just like within him, within himself. It feels like Tiger has been going somewhat off the rails mentally since his dad passed away. And I know that was about 20 years ago, but there are some voids that happen in your life. There are people in your life who leave this earth that you never end up replacing those people. And it has a forever impact on you. And sometimes you don't necessarily shake back from those things. And I feel like that's something that could be at play with something like that there too. And I mean, it's a sad thing. But please get a designated driver or something. Because as KB said, this is the fourth high-profile crash that he's been a part of. Eventually, at some point, if these crashes continue to happen, he's not going to continue to be able to walk away unscathed. And that's just the unfortunate reality of the situation. Thankfully, that didn't happen this time around. And hopefully it doesn't happen at all. Get an Uber, get a Lyft, get a designated driver, get something. Because as the sheriff in Martin County reported, KB, thankfully, not only was he not injured, but nobody else was injured either, because there was nobody else out there on the street at the time this happened. Had there been somebody else out there, the impact of it, this could have been a totally different situation. Now, in terms of the DUI elements of it, there were some type of pills that were found in his system. This wasn't an alcohol-related thing, and they even reported last Friday that they didn't believe it was an alcohol-related thing. Tiger did take the breathalyzer test, but he did not take the urine test. And the sheriff made it clear, like that's well within his right to not take the test if he doesn't want to take the test. But if you just look at the videos or the pictures of the vehicle flipped over, you're just thankful that didn't end up being as terrible as it could have been for Tiger or for anybody else out there involved in that neighborhood where it took place.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we seen situations like this go completely wrong. And, like I said, praying that he gets the help that he needs. I think him stepping away is the most important thing right now. Because like I said, you got to focus on things that are bigger than your career. You got to focus on your life. And like I said, we talk about the DUI aspects of it, and the pills that were found, I think that, I'm not going to speculate because I don't know exactly what those pills were for. I'm not even going to speculate and say like that, they could have been to address certain things that he may needed health wise. I have no idea. All I know is that crash could have been more, it could have been fatal, and it could have been something that helps open his eyes now. Like, I do need help. I do need to take time away. I do need this. Right? There are things that are more important in life right now for him, and I do hope that he gets that necessary help, and that he does have a turnaround, because like I said, he's only, I think, 50 or 51 years old. He still has a long way to go, but there's never a better time than after something tragic that you can actually go and turn your life around. So I do think that this is one of those moments, and it could be one of those things that he'll look back and say, man, I remember I was at the bottom and I brought myself out of everything to get to where I'm at right now. So it's never too late.
And on a side note, I also want to talk about Puka Nakua a little, because news did come out yesterday that he is in rehab. We saw some of the things that had been transpiring with him allegedly off the field involving alcohol and just different things within the past couple of months. Last week, there was a report that came out that he had allegedly bit a woman. I don't know exactly what all of that was about. Bit a woman and allegedly, again, all of this is alleged, allegedly also used anti Semitic language as well. But the fact that he is in rehab, and folks had to double check on this yesterday because it did come out on April 1st. So of course everybody was wondering, is this some type of April Fool's joke? And if it is, it's not funny. Thankfully, it wasn't that. And he is in rehab according to his attorney. And I hope that he's able to get himself on track with whatever it is that's going on with him off the field, because he is a magnificent talent. But even beyond that, you just care about the person. You want the person to be okay. We love watching Puka play football, but we want Puka, the person, to be okay more than anything.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, you know, as much as we love seeing the athlete that Puka Nakua is, if he's not right mentally, then what I'm saying, everything on the field, like we've seen players like not be right mentally, have a lot of substance abuse issues that could cause problems in their career. And I hope that that's not him, because he's just getting started and he's already off to an amazing start. I just hope that if he's really in rehab like like the reports have said, that he honestly takes it as seriously, takes it as serious as he needs to, because like I said, we love seeing him on Sundays. We love seeing the player he could possibly blossom into, because like right now he's on the right trajectory. I just that hope that these issues don't derail his career, because like I said, he's been outspoken on certain things. He's exhibited certain behavior that is troublesome, and like I said, it could. We've seen players' careers go down for far less than just this. So hopefully Puka gets the help that he needs, and hopefully he takes this rehab serious. Because there's nothing worse than having a guy, have so much potential and flame out for other reasons other than football.
And now we got to get to the biggest topic of the week in the world of sports that has been dominating most of the headlines. Jaden Ivey, formerly of the Chicago Bulls and Detroit Pistons, he was traded to the Bulls earlier this season in a trade away from the Detroit Pistons. And we know that he's been away as he's been recovering with his knee issues, KB. But he was waived from the Bulls earlier this week as well. This kind of came out of nowhere when we all got this notification on Monday. Waived by the Bulls for alleged anti-LGBTQ comments that he made. Well, they're not alleged because, we saw it on video. We saw what he had to say. He also made a video where he accused Steph Curry of not being a true believer in the Christianity faith. And now more things came out on Wednesday that say that he is accused of being too preachy in the Bulls locker room. We know that doesn't usually play well into locker rooms, sports locker rooms, because everybody doesn't come from those same type of backgrounds and have the same exact beliefs. Also accused of trying to press teammates with religious rhetoric. And also, I heard a rumor that he also was reportedly asking Bulls reporters if they were into fornication or had premarital sex. I don't know how true that is. I hope that part of it is not true at all. But with all of the videos that we've been seeing from Jaden Ivey on Instagram Live this week, at this point, I wouldn't put it past if that's true or not. Now, Jaden Ivey says that this is all coming from a place of where he is on his faith journey. He's on his walk of faith, somewhere that he's been recently after becoming a Christian in the past year or so. And he even admitted in some of these videos that some of the things that he is shunning and he is condemning people of doing, he used to participate in himself. But this part of things also needs to be noted too, KB. This is a young man who has noted about some traumatic, troublesome things that has happened in his past too, which will make you question Is this something that is mentally health related? Also, due to the fact that his career has been off track since he suffered that injury early last season, and things just haven't came back together since then. But he's been on video and he's admitted in a Zoom interview or on someone's platform, whoever was interviewing him, or if it was an interview, we know that he's been on video and he mentioned how he did get sexually abused as a child. And you heard him say in some of those videos that he didn't know what true love necessarily felt like. So it definitely feels like there's something deeper that's going on there. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to ask you, where do you stand on this with what the Bulls and the NBA did here, more so the Chicago Bulls? Because we see players get to remain on teams for doing more extreme things, sexually assaulting, abusing women, gambling. Terry Rozier is still technically on the Miami Heat's roster, despite all of these gambling accusations that have came out. So we see players that get to remain on teams for doing more extreme things. But Jaden Ivey, he got cut. Now, he was headed for free agency more than likely anyway. I don't believe the Bulls were going to keep him to begin with anyway. And I feel like in their minds, this probably gave them an excuse to go ahead and probably get him out of the door faster. I don't know if they expected some of the backlash that they're getting from it, because there are people sitting on two sides of the aisle on this. Those that are freedom of speech and First Amendment, and those who believe that this is pro-Christian, 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 what he's doing. And then there are those who believes that this is a guy that just needs to get help and all of these different things. But just in terms of him being waived and these being the reasons that he was waived, where do you stand on this?
So I look at it from like two standpoints. There's two things that are always going to be sensitive subjects in the world: religion, politics, because it's so divided. Now, when it comes to the comments that he made, it is very important that we point out certain things. I do think that he has a point in what he's saying, because he also went out on, like, I think a Zoom call, and he also pointed out the hypocrisy of the NBA when he said that Anthony Edwards actually used a slur, a slur for gay people in a video that was uploaded to Instagram. All he was done was fined. He was just fined, and that was it. There was nothing made more of it. There was nothing else done. Um, and he said that because he makes the Timberwolves money, because he gets them ratings, the NBA chose to turn a blind eye to it. Then you also have to bring up the situation with Miles Bridges, Kevin Porter, Terry Rozier. You got a list of others. So it's kind of like Adam Silver isn't. He is kind of at fault for this, because this is how the NBA works. We can excuse abusers, but we can't excuse a guy for speaking his mind on certain things. And I do think that I'm under the belief that love everyone. I'm on that belief, no matter homosexual, heterosexual, Christian, not Christian, doesn't really matter, because I say, I stay away from those things because they are controversial, and I choose to not engage in those conversations because they can become heated. But then I think where he gets himself into trouble a lot is, like, even speaking on the fact, like, okay, Steph Curry is not a real Christian. This person is not a real Christian. I think that you get into a very dangerous territory, because you can't be the standard bearer for who is a Christian and who isn't a Christian. Just because they may not be as deep into their faith as you are, does not necessarily mean they're not a Christian. And I think that that's where he loses credibility in that situation, because it's like, you're speaking on things that you don't know what they do in their off time. You don't know what they participate in as far as in their faith. You can't, like, Because you are a devout in your faith and you're a born again Christian does not mean that someone is less than because of the fact that they don't practice the same things that you do or that they're not as outspoken on certain things that you do. I don't think that there's one certain set way to be a Christian. Just like I don't think there's one certain set way to be if you have a political affiliation. There doesn't make like you don't get to be the person that is like gatekeeping saying you're not a real Christian or you're not a real you don't support this person because you do these things. No, I think that that's very subjective and it's very controversial because there's not one set way to do anything. I do believe that he had a point though when he said it does not matter what you say or what you do, it just depends on who you are. Because we've, like you said, we've seen people do worse and still have, stayed in the NBA. Maybe have been suspended, may have been fined, but they're still there. They're still in the contract. They're still making money. They're still being able to, what I'm saying, provide for their families and their team. So I think that it is a little bit of hypocrisy from the league standpoint that we can excuse certain things, but we can't excuse other things because, like I said, you have the gambling scandal, you have the abusers, people that have been accused of domestic violence against their partners. Those things have been swept under the rug. We don't even talk about them anymore. We don't talk about the Miles Bridges situation anymore. Hell, we don't even talk about the Kevin Porter situation anymore. Those were relevant things that happened because people were hurt, people were harmed. I don't necessarily see the harm in him, saying things. Now, you do have to be accountable because you are, whether you want to admit it or not, NBA players have such a, stature about themselves and they do have a presence amongst like, in the world that they do have to, be accountable and watch what they say because of the fact that you aren't just, a regular person anymore. You're not an average Joe. You can't just go out and say certain things because of how they can, offend a certain group of people. While I do feel like that his comments can be, detrimental, I do think the principle of what he's saying is true. We can't excuse one thing, but then not excuse another. I think that's where we start getting into real dangerous territory because if you're saying that a superstar can go and make those same comments, because it is true. Like X, do you believe that if, let's say, Luca made those same comments, he would have been cut by the team?
Absolutely not.
Exactly my point. Like we can't make excuses for other people just based off of their stature in the league or where they stand in the league, and then not make the same reasoning for other people. He did say, I'm hurt. I'm not, what I'm saying, I'm not contributing to the team. So it was easy for them to get rid of me. Which if he was headed for free agency and they were like, well, we got to cut our losses because him being 24 years old, he still is in the prime of his, career. He can still contribute. The talent is still there. But I do think that there is something deeper going on mental wise. Like mentally, I think that there is some things that he is fighting. It could be trauma from past. It could be a lot of things. I do think that he is, found his faith, and I appreciate someone being devout in their faith. But one thing I will say that just because other people don't do the same things that you do or practice the same things that you preach does not mean that they are any less devout than you are. They may just show it in different ways. And we can't go out there and just start saying that this person isn't really a Christian, or this person is less of this because they don't show the same things that I show. Because now you know you're being critical of someone else's lifestyle, and that's not what Christianity is about. None of that is like none of that is acceptable, and we got to get to a point where we define it clearly. We accept others because if we're taught to accept others for who they are, we can't start being like critical of how they live their lifestyles and say, well, I do this, you don't do this, because I could honestly, what would stop someone else from saying what Jaden Ivey did? You realized it later on in life. So what makes you more of a Christian than me when I always knew it? You see what I'm saying? It could be divisive in that standpoint. Like we don't have to do that. Like I'm glad he found his faith. I'm glad that, what I'm saying, he's willing to put it all on the line no matter the consequences or not. But I do think that he has to dial it back as far as being critical of others just because they don't do it the exact same way that he does it.
I also believe that some of his messaging, he needs to allow others to be the messenger for him, because I don't know if his NBA career is going to resume after this. It feels like he's done some form of irreparable damage to it and continues to do so with some of these videos that are coming out. This man was on a plane when he made this video accusing Steph Curry of those things. He's on a plane surrounded by other people. That's next level, KB. I don't know what to say. Like, it's one thing if you're in the privacy somewhere and you're doing that. This man was out publicly on a plane on his phone doing this. So if his basketball career does continue, though, sometimes you have to allow others to be the messenger for you so that you can go out there and do the other things that you've been blessed to be able to do, convey the other gifts that it is that you've been able to be blessed with. Because one thing the NBA has made very clear to us, if you start getting too preachy about things and you're not a certain person and you don't matter in a certain way to the league, especially when it comes down to that bottom line, they will get you out of there. This is part of the reason that it is believed that Mark Jackson has been blackballed as a coach in the NBA, despite the very good job that he did reviving the Golden State Warriors before they hired Steve Kerr, and then they went on to that next level of winning all those championships.
Yeah, and that was my whole thing I took issue with, is because if we're gonna hold people who are like, because like I said, this is the reason why I feel like some players choose not to talk to the media about certain things, because the words can get twisted. But I do feel like if we're gonna hold everyone to the standard, hold everyone. Don't just say, well, we're gonna make certain exceptions for this player because they contribute to the league in this way, or you know what I'm saying, like, because like I said, Steph, LeBron, KD, you know, Luca, guys like that, they're not going to get, they're not getting the same, like, we got to just be honest with ourselves. They're not getting the same thing done to them if they make those same comments. I don't care what they said. It would have to be to the point where it was like the worst thing you've ever heard in your life for them to even be considered like, okay, we're going to get rid of them. Because not only, oh, go ahead, X.
To the point that you're making, and I don't mean to cut you off, because I know that there are going to be people that are going to listen at that and they're going to say, well, what about Kyrie Irving and what happened to them? As spectacular as Kyrie Irving is, he does not mean to the NBA's lore and to their bottom line what Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and LeBron James mean to it.
Absolutely. And even with Kyrie, Kyrie wasn't released. Kyrie wasn't released. Even if that was, even when that situation happened, Kyrie would, like, the worst thing you could see them doing, suspending Kyrie, and they could say conduct detrimental to the team. That's all you could see. But there was never there was some public outrage from it, especially from the Jewish community. Like, but the problem is like, okay, so where do we draw the line? When do we start saying, okay, this is gonna be the minimum what we're gonna do no matter who it is? Because like we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing the situation change. The rules are changing depending on who it is, not necessarily what they did, but depending on who it is, depends on what your outcome will be. Worst case scenario, you get blackballed from the league, like Mark Jackson. You know, even Colin Kaepernick when he was blackballed from the league. It does depend on who you are, because, like I said, certain guys can make those same type of comments and they won't get the result that he got. Just like certain guys could do the same thing that Colin Kaepernick did. It was other people that took knees, but do you contribute to our bottom line? Do you contribute to making us money? Yeah, you could be controversial. Some people may lose support. You may not support you anymore, but ultimately, you still make us money. So we're gonna keep you here. We feel like that you're, like, in the Jaden Ivey situation, you're hurt. You're rehabbing. You're more trouble than it's worth right now for us to keep you on this team, and that is the reason why they made that decision. Because had it been someone else, like I said, even if we're gonna go to as big as somebody like a Luka Doncic, if we're going to go to someone, even if you're talking about a, you know, we've seen Ja Morant, he's been suspended before, not cut. Wielding the gun could have been something where somebody could have got hurt. Even himself, suspended, not cut. Even they even had an idea, even though we've seen sports shows talk about the idea of cutting him, he's still a member of the Grizzlies to this day. So that's why I say like we got to be consistent with what we're doing because if it's gonna be applied to one, apply it no matter what. Because if it's offensive, it's offensive. Not it can't be offensive depending on who said it. If it's offensive, it's offensive. If it's gonna be something where people are gonna be offended by it, I can't say, well, we can't really suspend LeBron because it's LeBron, but if it's like Rui Hachimura who said it, yeah, we're cool with that. We can go ahead and get him up out of here. Like we can't do that. Like because then you're starting to make it like you're starting to basically get into that territory where people are like, okay, why is the consequences different? What makes the consequences different other than the talent? Other than where they are, like I think that like you got to think about some people are global ambassadors for the game. They would never get that type of consequence. But then some guys like Jaden Ivey, who's not known on large scale, especially like you talking about globally, they feel like that they can cut ties with him because ultimately he's not contributing to the team right now in a way that could warrant keeping him. So I think that that's the only issue I have with the whole thing. It's not even the free speech thing. It's more of we are changing things. We're changing the standard and the procedures based off of who it is. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and we've had people admit that they do things like that. Like you've heard the stories of Jimmy Johnson when he was the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. As a matter of fact, you've seen the videos. If you watch the Dallas Cowboys documentary series that came out on Netflix late last year, late in the summer, as we were going into the fall, there was a player on the team that couldn't necessarily obtain the conditioning that needed to be obtained because he had an asthma problem. And Jimmy Johnson's response to him was go have asthma over on the practice field. And the guy ended up getting cut because of asthma. This is an actual health issue that we're talking about here. And he lost his job over that. But if Troy Irvin or Michael Irvin's late to the plane, they might. Well, let me not use the late to the plane analogy because if these guys were late to the bus, they did leave them and they made them meet them at the team plane. But say if these guys had fallen asleep in a meeting, he walk over there and nudge them like, "Hey, wake up, wake up." If Emmett falls asleep, wake up, wake up. If it's one of the second string offensive linemen or somebody like that, you don't have your job anymore if you do that. So yeah, I'm in agreement with you 100%. If we're going to do this, then we need to do it all the way across the line and not just because of who certain people are and what they mean to the bottom line. But unfortunately, KB, you and I both know this. That's just not the world we live in. That's not going to end up changing anytime soon in terms of that. And it's unfortunate, but unfortunately, it's just how things are. It's all about who we like. It's all about how do you benefit us? And if you help bring dollars into it, we're willing to dismiss almost anything. The only thing you really can't go out there and do, you can't kill anybody because you can't do things like that. And you shouldn't be allowed to do things like that in any way whatsoever. Anyway, I'm just using these as examples for folks to really understand that, hey, there are different rules for different people.
Yeah, and we see this across no matter sports. We see it in politics. We see we see it in like I said, religion, politics, sports. We see it across any area that you want to pick. We can have two people do the exact same thing, but people will view it differently depending on who it is. Like they will view it differently. There will be excuses made for one that won't be made for the other. Like literally we can look at the same situation and people say, "Oh, that was different because of this." No, no, no. We're talking about the exact. I'm saying the exact same situation. Two different people. It's no different than if you were to say, "Well, I don't like this person because they do these things." But then your friend does the same thing, but you don't hold your friend to the same exact standard. That's my whole point. We do this all the time, and pretty much everybody's been guilty of it at one point in their life of creating bias depending on who it is. So we're gonna hold. Like the way I choose to live my life is, if I'm gonna hold a stranger to a standard, I need to hold the same people to the standard that are around me the closest, like that are always, consistently around me. Like you may be held to even higher standard because of the fact that I know you personally. But we've seen life ain't fair, life ain't even. Things are depending on who you are. You may get a completely different result. And like you said, it's not fair, but that's just where we are as a society at this point. Like we know that people are going to change up the rules depending on if it's a certain person or not. So
It also should be noted that Jaden Ivey's mother is the head coach of the Notre Dame women's basketball team, Niall Ivey. And I don't know what the sexualities are of the players in that locker room, and I don't necessarily want to know. But in a good chunk of women's sports, there are lesbians. Let's just keep it 100% down the line. There are. And if she does have some of those in her locker room, I can only imagine the awkward position that all of this has placed her under, KB.
yeah, because you don't want it like to come off as like, okay, so this is what you've been preaching to him his whole life, or is this who you are as a person now? Because like I said, we see the saying birds of a feather flock together. We don't know if these comments have been something that y'all have talked about in a private setting, and that's how you feel too. You just may not be as vocal about it because of who you are and what your position is at the university. So like you said, you don't know what the sexualities of some of the players on her team are, but I really feel like that it shouldn't matter. I don't personally. It sounds bad, but I don't personally care how someone lives their life. That has no bearing on anything I do or don't do or anything like that. So I don't care about what you do in your private life. Personally, I don't care about what you do in your public life either. I mean, if it doesn't affect me in a certain way, like if it doesn't affect me personally, I don't have a comment on it one way or another. Like if you don't support it, you always have the option to, not be around it. It's just that simple. Like I feel like that once you start getting into how people live their lives, you're going to start being you open yourself to a lot of criticism because no one's telling you that you can't be devout in your faith. But I just say like even when it comes to faith wise, you can be as devout as you want to be. Just don't push that on to other people because everyone is not willing to accept it the same way that you are. Just like you can't let your opinions become something where you're saying it as if it's facts. Like I think that's what Jaden Ivey was doing in some of his comments. He was stating certain things as if they were just blatant facts. And I'm like, no, that's an opinion at the end of the day. Like you could say that Steph Curry is not a Christian in your opinion, but when you start making it seem like this is a blatant fact, like undisputable fact, that's when you start getting into like how how is he gonna tell me what I am and what I'm not? That's where I'm just like, okay, now you lost me. You had me and then you lost me because once you start telling other people who they are and what they believe in, now you're getting into a territory where it's like, okay, now you kind of lost me. I don't support that. So I do get it to an extent of when it talks about free speech. Yes, you can be free, have whatever free speech you need to, but just know there are consequences for free speech. Nobody says you couldn't make those comments, but you also have to take the punishment that comes along with said comments if you are going to make them. That's with anybody. Like nobody's saying you can't say what you want. You can say whatever you want, but that does not mean that everyone's going to accept whatever you say and just you're going to be able to just move on like nothing happened. That's not true at all. So free speech is still a thing. Don't get me wrong, but when you are representing an organization, this is just like your job. You can't go and put whatever like you can't go and promote guns and stuff on your social media because jobs look at that kind of stuff. That is something that you just can't do. So you have to be able if you're going to post that stuff, be willing to take the consequences and the criticism and everything else that comes along with it.
Yeah, and I want to close out the segment by simply saying this. I know that people might listen to this and they might say, well, you guys talk about God on your show quite a bit. Yeah, we do, but we talk about it from the standpoint of what God means to us and what God has done in our lives. We don't come across and try to spew the message in terms of trying to convert people to believe in the same exact things that we believe in. And as a matter of fact, when we're given these different testimonials that we might give from time to time, we always preface it how we want to help deliver the message to other people and we hope other people are inspired. You always hear us say something like, and if you are a believer, if you do practice the Christianity faith, that's how you usually hear us go about it. We don't blatantly just come out and tell people, get in that word, get on your knees and drop down and pray. We don't just come out and say things like that because you have to understand that everybody does not come from the same walk of life. And that's okay that everybody doesn't come from the same walk of life. It doesn't make us any better than anybody else. So we'll continue to follow this situation that really took the entire sports world by storm this week, and we'll see the latest as things just continue to develop because I have a feeling, KB, that this is not the last that we're going to hear from Jaden Ivey going forward. And it's not the last of the situation. And I'm hopeful that it's not the last of his NBA career, too, because there's still a lot of potential there, a lot of untapped potential.
Yeah, him being so young, I hope he gets another opportunity because, like I said, we've seen people do far less, I mean, far worse, and still continue their NBA career. I think that he has to get himself right, like from a mental standpoint and physical standpoint as well, with him rehabbing injuries as well. So I think that his focus needs to be elsewhere right now. But I do think that, I hope that he does get the opportunity because, like I said, I think that he's still talented. I still think he's a talented guy. I still think he can help a team win. So, it still remains to be seen if he'll get the opportunity, but I'm hopeful that he does.
And I'm also not blatantly just going to say, I hope he gets the help that he needs that other people have been saying that. Well, we don't know for a fact if he really does need help or not. We provided some examples of some things that would make you think that. So I simply want to say, if he is in some form of distress, if he is going through something mentally, if these are indeed the case, I hope he gets the help that it is that he needs if he does need to seek help.
Yeah.
I want to just word it like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I may have even jumped too far, jumped the gun on that. Like, I don't know if he actually is suffering through any type of mental crisis. He could just be very devout in his faith, and this is all just coming out as, a cry for help. And it may not be anything wrong with him personally. So, yeah, I do want to, I'm glad you clarified that. And I do want to, draw it back a little bit of saying like if he is going through anything, yes, we do hope he gets help. But if he is not, then I hope that he is okay with everything that happens, in his life, with being, which, you can't, worry about the consequences of things when you are like a believer. If that is where you're at, you're not worried about the consequences of how people are going to react. So
All right, man, we're getting ready to end the show, but we're going to do it just by giving you our official Final Four and National Championship game predictions. For the first women's matchup that we're going to talk about is UCLA versus Texas. I think this will be a competitive game, but I'm ultimately going to give the edge to Texas. We haven't seen Madison Booker have to play like a superstar necessarily in the past two games. I believe we're going to see her reemerge into that type of level in this matchup. So give me Texas to win this matchup.
yeah, I think she is gonna have to put that cape on this one time because, like I said, UCLA is tough. I think that Texas does get it done. Ultimately, I think it is going to be a competitive game. I'm not going to make a score prediction, but I do think that it will be within, 10 points. I think that the score is going to be tight because I do think these are two really talented teams that can honestly, I can see either one winning. I just give Texas a slight edge because I do think that they do have a game changer in Madison Booker. I think that she can actually take over a game. So I'll give them the edge.
We got UConn and South Carolina in that second women's game. I'm not going to give a score. I'm just going to say give me UConn. I hope it's not a blowout, but give me UConn to win and to head back to the national championship for a second straight year.
Yeah, it's hard to pick against UConn. I do think that South Carolina is going to make it interesting. And, I think that South Carolina, the way that they have to approach this game, they got to come out and blitz UConn right from the jump. Like, if they get down by 15 points, I don't see a comeback. I think that this UConn team is the most talented team and has been the most talented team all year. So I do think that UConn will get it done. Like you said, I'm not going to give a score. but I think UConn gets it done ultimately.
Jumping to the men's Final Four now, Arizona and Michigan. I'm hopeful that this will be a competitive game, but I'm going to pick Arizona to win it.
Yeah, give me Arizona. Like I said, I've been an advocate for them for all year. I think they're the most talented team out in the country, and I think they're going to get it done.
Illinois versus UConn in that final men's Final Four matchup. And KB, you pretty much already said it. It's been fun watching Illinois, but I believe that this is where it ends too, just like you said earlier. I think we're going to have Arizona and UConn playing for the biggest prize in men's college basketball on Monday night, and that should be a very compelling matchup.
Yeah, yeah. I just think that UConn is riding high right now. They're riding momentum of, the shocking but thrilling win that they had against Duke. I think that that's enough to propel them in a one game Final Four to get them to the national championship. And then you might see a coaching matchup that could possibly, what I'm saying, be one of the best matchups we've seen between, two coaches, like I said, Dan Hurley, who's already won, and the guy who's possibly could be the next UNC head coach. Hey, I'm not saying that that's what will happen, but I'm not saying it won't happen either. I think that this is going to be could be a compelling national championship, no matter who wins. I think it's very compelling. I think the two of the most talented teams. We got a possible 1-2 matchup, one and two seed matchup, no matter how it goes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So, in the matchup for the women's national championship game, as we predicted, Texas versus UConn, I am landlocked on this one right now. But you know what? I feel the way about UConn as I said I felt about the Dodgers. I'm not going to believe anybody can actually beat them when it matters until I actually see it. Give me UConn over Texas and what I believe is going to be a very competitive national championship game on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that until I see it, I gotta go UConn. Like I said, they're the favorites for me. They're gonna stay the favorites unless something like, unless something develops that I just haven't seen. I gotta go with them. I gotta go with them to still be the national championship front runner because, like I said, it's too much talent over there. I think that Texas does stand the best chance to beat them. If it because I think that it's Texas and then South Carolina as far as the best opportunities to take them down. But I just don't see this season ending. Like I think it's championship or bust for them. So I'm gonna still stick with UConn.
And then the very next night, we got UConn again on the men's side going up against Arizona. Man, I hope it's a competitive game. I hope it's one of the best national championship games we've seen. It'd be amazing if we could get another thriller like we got in 2016 with Villanova and UNC. I don't think that's what we'll get here. But give me Arizona to complete the job and get the win on Monday night.
Yeah, I don't see another Cinderella ending like UConn had against Duke. I think that Arizona takes care of business and gets them out the way early. I'm not gonna say blowout, but I will say that I think Arizona takes care of business and they win the national championship from the men's side.
We'll have to wait to see what happens, and we'll be right back here next week giving you the rundown based on what we actually end up watching this weekend and we watch on Monday night. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. We thank everybody for listening in, however you listen, however you watch. KB, I'm X, and we're saying peace.
Peace.